In this lesson of How to Excel, we'll look at how to work with icons and conditional formatting. Something that hopefully looks a bit like this. This table has a few different things that basically it is comprised of. So it has the countries, it has annual GDP growth, and these are just percentages from 0.2% all the way up to 18.3%. And then you see that I've added stars here and various smiley faces. And that's because there are a few different ways that you can play with icons in Excel with conditional formatting. I suppose the first thing to say is that if you select your icon, your data tab, and similar to before, we're going right up here in the middle, conditional formatting, and we could add a new rule, you'll notice straight away that there's a label here called icon sets. So if you're interested in having the icons directly in the cells along with the numbers, there are a number of built-in different ones. So you can have a red, amber, and a green arrows going down, staying the same, or going up, or stars, or kind of degrees here in terms of when the values over this, how strong is the signal, and even little mini pie charts or little different dots there. My problem with that is that they only give you a very narrow set to work with. You can actually choose your own custom ones, it looks like. Although I think that means that you kind of get to choose still from their set of icons. So I find that a little bit limiting, especially because I think we discussed this before. It's not brilliant having red, amber, and green necessarily when red and green next to each other for colorblind related accessibility issues. But I will just put this in just so you see what it looks like. So this should be, it was greater than 10, I've done this the wrong way around, greater than or equal to 1. Hopefully, yes, that goes ahead and that gives us something, although even that doesn't look quite right to me because I think I said greater than 10% should be green and whatever. So I'm going to undo that because although that it is available, it's not one of the ways that I like to work with it. Another way of doing this is, well, there are a few different ways of doing it. One of the things that we've done here is I have insert a little bit of a formula so that we can change whatever icon we want it to be depending on the value that is here. So for example, if you look at this formula, it's basically saying if this particular value here is less than 1%, then display the bad face, and if it's more than 1%, put a smiley face, basically. And the thing that you'll notice about this formula, and this is really important here, is the smiley face and the frowny face have the dollar signs in front of the column label and the row label. That's because as we drag this series down, rather, we don't want that to actually change the try and pull different icons from different places. So that just fixes it to that particular cell. And we can really put anything in these cells for good and bad. So I'm going to delete this for now. And this works a little bit differently on a Mac and a PC, I'm afraid. So I'm going to show you the Mac for the time being, and if there are questions about how it works on a PC, I can maybe catch that a little bit later. But if you go to the Insert ribbon, there's a symbol. It takes a little bit of a second, and then it opens a bunch of different symbols that you could possibly include. So here we do have little pictographs, we have different stars, we have other shapes. We could be including things like different cards. So you could actually have a label that looks like these Mahjong 1, 3, 4, 5. And if you did a formula, you could say if it's 1, if it's first place, you can do 1, if it's second, you can do 2, that sort of a thing, through to different bullets and stars and arrows. So you could say if the value is larger than the value before, then you can make it an up arrow. If it's less, a down arrow. If it's the same, a right facing arrow, any of those sorts of things. The one thing that I would say, basically you can do anything with these different icons. The only thing that I would kind of avoid at this point, because we're going to be trying to color things, is to use some of the more modern looking emojis. Those won't go to different colors. Although you can use the different flags if you wanted to just go in and hand code, okay, next to Benin we'll find the Benin flag, or Nigeria, the Nigerian flag, that sort of a thing. But so otherwise, make sure that you're using from these letter-like symbols or these pictographs or anything that's basically in black and white. So instead of a smiley face for good, I'm going to say that that represents an increase. And I'm going to have it be a filled one like that. And if it is bad, again, I'm going to do insert symbol tab, and I'm going to say do a downward facing arrow. Why not? Okay, so already that's changed the symbols, and this is just done through a regular sort of if statement function in this particular cell. So these are all less than 1, these are all 1 or greater, basically. Now we can actually add some color to this as well. If we select them and we go back to our home ribbon, and on the conditional formatting, we'll do a new rule. And let's just go straight to the classic and basically go to use a formula to determine which cells to format. Now, because this is not within the cell itself, we actually want this to be based on this, whatever's this value here in our data. So actually, we want to say AH7 is less than, this is done as a percent, so I'm going to say 0.1 there. And then the other thing that's really important here is, first of all, when you're doing this formula, if you use the arrow to try and get around this formula bar, you see that it's actually moving the cell, and I've lost the formula. So you have to be very, very careful if you're trying to correct something in this particular formula, how you go about doing that. So I'm going to add that back in, and then that $sign I said keeps it locked in at that specific cell. So if we do want to keep it for everything in that column, but we actually want this to change. So for this cell, it's related to this cell, and this one, it's related to that one. So we're just going to make sure that that second $sign is deleted. Then we get to change the formatting. So if we go to the custom format, and with our font, let's say anything less than 1 is going to be one of our nice bright orange Afrobarometer colors. And let's go ahead and keep the fill the same color for now, that kind of background beige. So it's really about changing the color of the font itself that we're doing that on. If we hit OK, we can see already, so all of the ones that are less than 1% have now not only a downward facing arrow, but are also colored orange. One of the things that we can do, again, let's select these then. Let's say that we do want to make a new rule here that says if it's over 10, it's going to be green. We do as a very similar thing. We go back to the classic formatting. We say format cells only that contain a specific cell value. Sorry, that is, I'm getting ahead of myself. We go back to using the formula, excuse me. And we do the same formula where we go back here and say whatever's in that cell, if it is greater than 10%, which is 0.1, then we are good to go. Again, I want to click out and make sure that that $sign is not in front of the 7. but we're going to change a new custom format. Again, let's keep the background color the same, but we can change the font colors. So maybe we're working with a turquoise. We hit OK on that. We hit OK again. And we can see that we now have those two different colors applied to the two different categories in there. We could also create, instead of just having good and bad, we could have medium, and we could change the ones that are in black to, instead of going up, we say that it's a neutral, a more neutral, or maybe a square or something like that. Yeah, but that's basically one way of working with this. One other thing, and the reason that I've left this in here, is because I wanted to show you that there is one slight different way of working with this as well. And if you see what this cell actually is a formula that says it equals AH7. So this is actually, the value of this cell is exactly the same, 0.2%. However, it's showing a star. How have we managed that one? Well, you'll see if you are looking very closely that we have the number format as custom, and you can kind of do this yourself. And if you click in, you see that the number format is basically the star. I did the same thing where basically, I'm sorry because my symbol inserting doesn't seem to be working, but I inserted a star and then copied and pasted the symbol straight in here. And so what that is showing, instead of the value of that number, is a star itself. In this case, if you format this directly, or heck, why don't we even include the numbers in on this as well? If we added a new rule, instead of having to do the formula, you can say format only cells that contain a cell value, and you could say is less than 0.01. And again, we can change this to be a format however we want to. Let's keep along with our same sort of approach as before, where we keep it the same background, but we make it a red in color. Then that actually takes both of those cells and turns them to orange. Because it's not looking if whatever is in this cell, it's still saying this is actually the value of the cell, but we have it displaying an icon. So that might be a useful way of approaching it. It might not be, but it's just a way to show you that there is more than one way of getting around this and of skinning the cat, as I suppose the saying goes.